Upon stepping into Bill Dishinger's train room, you're overwhelmed. It appears a very talented and highly skilled artist has been at work here. Everything about this layout is absolutely stunning. There are several things that aren't commonly found in the world of O-gauge trains. For example, look at these extremely detailed scenes. The majesty of the rocks and mountains, exquisitely detailed trees, shrubs, and perhaps above all else, the expert use of weathering on all of the locomotives, cars, and buildings. Looking at all of these scenes, you'd probably think Bill's been working on this layout for decades. But what you're viewing has been accomplished in just 2.5 years. While Bill's had a long-time interest in model trains, there was a 40-year gap in his life where trains just didn't exist. Like so many of us, though, the spark that ignited this flurry of activity started a long time ago.
Well, really, I got started in my train thing way back when I was a little boy. Got some trains for Christmas. One thing led to another. Got an American Flyer when I was a teenager, and then when I got out of high school, got an HO set. Little by little, I guess they disappeared. I have no idea what happened to them. That was many years ago, farther back than I can remember. Went in the Marine Corps and sold all the trains because didn't know exactly what was going to happen to them or whatever, and had other interests at that time. It was quite a few years before I got back into the train thing again. In fact, it was probably about 40 years. Went to a train show, saw a wooden model of a Shay, and fell in love with it. Got the model, and that was my inspiration. And it just kind of sat there on my wall for a few years. Happened to go to a train store, and Lionel had just come out with a Shay, and they were demonstrating it. And I fell in love with it, bought it, bought a couple cars and some track, and started kind of experimenting with it. Started setting up a layout up in my one bedroom, but soon realized the bedroom was way too small for actually what I wanted to do. So I relocated to one of the rooms in the basement, which my layout now resides in, probably about a 12-foot by 25-foot layout. It actually took me about 2.5 years from the time I started building the first part of the bench work until I pretty much completed the scenery to where it is now.
This is an incredible accomplishment, and as anyone who started a layout can tell you, it's simply amazing. We're sure his friends and train club buddies think it's pretty amazing too.
Yeah, they're astounded at the time that it took me to build this. They figured that I was retired and that I worked 18 hours a day on the layout. And I says, no, I've got a full-time job. I work 40 to 50 hours a week. This is my hobby. This is my relaxation. When I get home at night, I come down and work on the train. On weekends, I work on the train. My wife, Lois, she complains a lot that I'm not up there with her doing different things, but at least she knows where I'm at. She always states that I'm under her foot all the time, so to speak, because I'm in the basement.
This is the Lionel Shay Bill mentioned earlier, which was instrumental in launching his newfound interest. You would think Bill must be a highly trained student of the fine arts to have attained this level of work.
No. I guess most of my qualities, attention to detail. I like to work with my hands. I like to look at pictures, look at drawings, and then duplicate them. And that's kind of how I put all this together. A lot of common sense, a lot of initiative, a lot of reading. Once I pretty much completed my layout, it was nice watching the shiny new train cars and engines, but my layout was very detailed in scenery, and I had done some weathering on some of the buildings as I built them. So as a result, I thought, well, there's still something missing. There's something missing. And then all of a sudden I realized, well, the trains don't look realistic to fit the scenery that they're in. So I thought, well, it can't be too hard. I bought a couple books on weathering, and I wrote some videos and got some weathering materials, and I practiced on a couple of pieces of rolling stock that I had. And I said, well, this isn't too bad. And so once I was done practicing and I thought I had kind of a good technique down, I started weathering the cars. And once I started with the first one, I couldn't stop there because it kind of fit into place. Everything else was out of place. So one by one, I just kept going until I finally had everything weathered. It probably took me about 2 months to weather all my rolling stock and engines.
Some people in the hobby believe weathering reduces the value of their equipment. How would Bill respond to that criticism?
To me, the value is the way they look on my layout, and they look realistic in the setting that they're in right now. I don't care that much about value or holding their appearance for resale. I want to enjoy them. I want other people to enjoy them, and that's all part of the puzzle, so to speak. When you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, that's what you get your final picture.
So how did a farm boy from northern Ohio, transplanted to suburban Atlanta, Georgia, become interested in old-time logging and historic railroading?
Well, the logging interest kind of came about because of my interest in the Shea engine, which is what started me on this venture. So I started reading up on logging. I subscribed to railroad logging magazines, started to see how the spar trees were created and how they operated, and the steam donkeys and the sawmills and everything that goes with logging. And I thought, now this is interesting. It's a lost art, and it would be a very focal point of my railroad if I could have a logging camp to go with my Shea engines and just the visual effect of everything put together. So that's why I wanted to dedicate a section of my layout as a logging camp. And it's different and unique. Well, the scenery kind of came about through reading books and videos, because I didn't grow up near a railroad, but I grew up on a farm. And of course, every place you look, there's scenery, so to speak, bushes and trees and grass and things. And so I says, well, if I'm going to build these railroads and the engines and trains that I had were highly detailed, well, scenery has to go along with it. And it was like a snowball. One thing kind of led to another, starting with the weathering tracks and then putting ballast down. And says, well, now you got to have some grass, and you got to have some dirt, and you got to have some rocks, and it just kind of kept growing and growing and growing. But through reading books on scenery, through looking at pictures in all the railroad magazines on scenery, and I created quite a collection of folders with examples of scenery, from bushes to trees to shrubs to fences to freight yards. It just goes on and on and on. And I painted the side of the rails, because if you look at any railroad, you'll see the sides are always rusted and the tops are shiny because of the trains that go over them. Anytime I'm out driving around or riding, if I see any kind of a railroad or railroad crossing or a train or whatever, I'm always observing and looking at it to see how it looks. I take pictures of it to try and duplicate those things in my mind. So as I'm building my layout and doing my scenery and weathering and all, that I try and duplicate that as close as possible. Some of the things I wanted were unique to what I wanted. And the only way I was going to do that was to build it myself. And I'm not an engineer or designer, but I just kind of put some common sense and two together and used some graph paper and drew out some kind of rough blueprints, and then just used those as templates to build over when I built my framework and everything for the different scratch build items for buildings and for trestles. When I started the whole entire layout, I wasn't sure what was going to go where. Things just kind of started falling in place as I said, well, I know I want the logging camp in this location, and I'm going to have the river and the creek in this place, and I got the sawmill placed here, and I got my mine placed here, and I was running out of little spots, but I had one corner left, and I thought, a farm might just fit in there. And I'd like to have a farm because my wife and I both were raised on a farm. So I started kind of looking through catalogs, and I found barns and all, and my wife, she says, nah, I don't like that barn. No, I don't like that one. So all of a sudden I thought, well, what if I designed and built your farmstead? And she thought, well, can you do that? And I said, I don't know if I don't try. So I took some photos of the old farmstead and put some graph paper down and started just designing and building, and I finally came up with the farm, the house and the barn. The windmill is not on her farmstead, but it's on my farmstead up home in Ohio. And again, I couldn't find the windmill, the size and the type that I wanted, so I designed and built my own windmill also. I wanted an engine house, and I had a kind of a freight yard, and I had a place for the engine house, but again, I couldn't find what I wanted. I knew what I wanted, but I couldn't find one in O scale. So I said, well, here I go again. I'm going to go ahead and design and build my own. I had, in my freight yard, I had extended one section of my track all the way through the wall onto my workbench, that I could run an engine or cars in there to do maintenance on or test them or do whatever. And I says, well, now if I put the engine house on one side of the wall and I put the other end of the engine house on my workbench side, it's just different and unique. And so that's why I did that. I bought a trestle and bridge book and saw all the examples and the photographs and everything they had. They had some plans for some trestles, and what I did is I took those plans and modified them to fit my application. Again, I had some unique needs for trestles, nothing you could find or buy anywhere. So I just started getting graph paper and started putting all the pieces together. It was like building a puzzle. You had to build so many of the pieces, and then you assembled it on the table as you start putting all the cross members together, and you just kind of finish it all out. And I wanted a unique drive under for vehicles, so I built that. I just built a lot of unique things into my trestles, again, that you just couldn't find anywhere. And it wasn't all that difficult once you get started. It's just the idea of reading it and putting it down on paper, and it's very time consuming. You've got to have a lot of patience for everything that I did, whether it's weathering, whether it's trestles or scratch building or weathering track or ballast or whatever you do. It takes a lot of patience. When I started getting into this, I saw all the log loaders and the milk cars and the cattle cars and all these different operating accessories, the McDonald's and the firehouses and all. And I didn't like that, you know, the Plasticville type appearance or whatever. That isn't what I wanted. You got toy trains and you got a model railroad. And the toy trains is fine for those people that want to go that route. I wanted a model railroad where it's a model, it's a diorama of a specific idea in my head or a location. One thing that people ask me quite a bit, and it was a kind of a problem at first, and that was keeping the track clean, which is a big issue. If you don't have clean track, your operation isn't going to run properly. After I had all the track down, before I started any scenery, I had to make sure that my track operated perfectly. And that was one good feature of the MTH engines. They've got a feature in their menu that reads track voltage as the engine goes around the track. So you can pick up on any weak points of your wiring. And I found dozens in my layout that I had to go through and resolder wires or reconnect things to make sure that I had perfect operation, that I wasn't going to get flickering lights, I wasn't going to get engines that stopped on switches, things of this sort. 30% of my layout is in tunnels. You can't get to those to clean the track. Plus, with the extensive scenery that I have and the size of the table, it would be almost impractical to try and manually clean that track. I use an acetone fluid. I clean it about once a month. And that's all I have to do. Lights don't flicker, engines don't stop or hesitate on switches. Everything runs flawlessly, and my track is kept clean all the time using this special track cleaning car with acetone. In fact, here's the car right here. It's made by CMX, and it's listed in the different railroad magazines, model railroad magazines. And I clean the track about once a month, and it stays clean, and my trains run fabulously.
With the layout being 12 by 25 feet, highly detailed and surrounded by 3 walls, It must be difficult reaching distant places to work and clean. Here's how Bill accomplishes those tasks.
I've got 5 main access points to get up into the table and 3 other smaller access points. 2 of the access points, they drop out of the bottom of the table, 3 of them lift out the top. When I built the table, initially I wasn't going to put inserts in there, I was just going to leave the openings because I thought, well, it's just too hard to make those covers and do what I need to. But as I was adding more and more scenery to the table, I was finding had these big gaps, and also I was missing the opportunity of carrying on the scenery from one side to the other. So I experimented with one of the openings and made a plate for it, put scenery on it. I said, this isn't real difficult, I'll go ahead and do all the rest, and I did that. And now it's really a challenge for people to see exactly where these openings and access points are.
Like everything else on the layout, Bill's rocks and mountains are expertly detailed, and we're interested in knowing how he created them.
I use what they call a geodesic foam. And the reason I use that is because it's simple to use, it's lightweight, it's pliable before it cures. It gives you so much more flexibility in doing your layouts, especially like mine. It's got all the different curves and the features to it. And if you do plaster, once it comes out of the mold, it's hard and that's it. You can't do anything with it but paint it. This, you can form it and you can cut it and you can tear it and you can position it and you can flip it over and you can do any number of things with it. It gives you so much more versatility. But basically, you've got the 2-part foam that we use for a backing. What I did is I put window screen down on a piece of paper. You pour a mixture of the equal parts of this that are mixed together on that, and it gives what we call a backing. You hot glue it to a framework because your molds are very pliable. They're very sensitive. They tear easy. They're thin, and they got to have a backing to support them. Then you use equal parts of the resin to pour into the molds. Once you put a mold, you got to put a mold release. There's a lot of directions that go with it, but it isn't that complicated. And once they come out, again, you've got a time limit of about 10 to 15 minutes that's pliable. You can tear it, you can cut it, you can position it how you want, you can curve it. I did inside of tunnels with it. I did a lot of things with it that are very, very flexible, very lightweight, and I'd recommend it to anybody. That's how I got my whole complete layout done.
With up to 5 trains operating at a time, safely controlling them is a concern. A 3-by-5-foot track diagram hangs from the far end of the layout. Lights indicate which direction switches have been thrown. With 30% of the track out of sight in tunnels or in hidden staging yards, it's essential to know where the trains are located. This is accomplished by the assistance of 10 strategically placed video cameras and a bank of monitors. Each monitor can be switched between 2 cameras. Bill has his hands full and maintains keen vigilance over his railroad. Those storm clouds in the background look threatening, and as day turns to night, thunder rumbles in the distance.